Okay, this is now my 5th attempt at getting this to record without an interruption or actually recording my voice or my phone just stopping the recording halfway through. So here we go. Forgive me if my voice starts to dip and I feel like I'm losing the will to live. Deep breath. Okay. This week I want you to try sample paper 2. Writers' viewpoints and perspectives. If you joined me in January, we have covered all of this, so it's nothing new. If you joined in September, you've covered all of this and paper 1, but I'm going to go over paper 1 so that people aren't just sent a paper that they would struggle with. You've got 2 sources, a modern one and a 19th century one. Don't panic about the 19th century one. I'm going to read it through and hopefully make some sense of it, because it is difficult to pick out information from a text written by someone 200 years ago who used a very different language and a very different tone and style. So, extract from I Am Malala, a memoir by Malala Yousafzai. We have looked at this before when we covered summary for paper 2 and autobiographies. I'm not going to read that one out because I think that you will be fine understanding the language of that one. And also, I have read it out in previous recordings and I'm not going to read it again. This one, source B, Margaret Oliphant. Another autobiography, so they're the same genre of text. Just one is very different in age. I remember nothing of Wallyford where I was born, but opened my eyes to life so far as I remember in the village of Laswade, where we lived in a little house, I think, on the road to Dalkeith. I recollect the wintry road ending to my consciousness in a slight ascent, with big ash trees forming a sort of arch, underneath which I fancy was a toll bar, the way into the world appropriately barred by that turnpike. A turnpike is just a barrier where you have to pay to get across. But no, that was not the way into the world, for the world was Edinburgh, the coach for which I am almost sure went the other way through the village and over the bridge to the left hand, starting from somewhere close to Mr. Todd the baker's shop, of which I have a faint and kind recollection. It was by that way that Frank came home on Saturday nights to spend Sunday at home, walking out from Edinburgh, about 6 miles, to walk in again on Monday in the dark winter mornings. I recollect nothing about the summer mornings when he set out on that walk, but remember vividly, like a picture, the Monday mornings in winter, the fire burning cheerfully and candles on the breakfast table, all dark but with a subtle sense of morning, though it seemed a kind of dissipation, a waste of time or energy, to be up so long before the day. I can see myself, a small creature, seated on a stool by the fire, toasting a cake of dough which was brought for me by the baker with the prematurely early rolls, which were for Frank. This dough was the special feature of the morning to me, and I suppose I had it only on these occasions. And my mother, who never seemed to sit down in the strange little warm bright picture, but to hover about the table pouring out tea, supplying everything he wanted to her boy. How proud, how fond of him, her eyes liquid and bright with love as she hovered about. And Frank, the dearest of companions so long, then long separated, almost alienated, brought back again at the end to my care. How bright he was then, how good always to me, how fond of his little sister, impatient by moments, good always. And he was a kind of god to me, my Frank as I always called him. I remember once weeping bitterly over a man singing in the street, a buttoned-up, shabby, genteel man, whom, on being questioned why I cried, I acknowledged I thought like my Frank. That was when he was absent, and my mother's anxiety reflected in a child's mind went, I suppose, the length of fancying that Frank too might have to sing in the street. He would have come off very badly in that case, for he did not know one tune from another, much less could he sing a note. Right, that's a lot to take in. But don't worry about it too much, get the general gist of it. It's a woman talking about her childhood. She has a brother called Frank who she loves dearly, and at some point they've become alienated. They've broken apart. For some reason Frank isn't there, and she gets upset thinking about him when she sees a man singing on the street, because Frank might be in a position where he has to sing on the street for money. Right, here are the questions. These are easy. True or false? Malala. Source A. Some are implicit, some are explicit. Remember, explicit means they're just there, clear to see, clear as day. Implicit is more like you have to infer from the text. For example, I will give you an answer. Statement E, there was a market near Malala's home. Nowhere in the text does it say that there is a market outside her home. But what she does say is that she can hear the bazaar from her bedroom. A bazaar is a market, so obviously there must be a market near Malala's home, so that statement is true. You need to refer to source A and B for question 2, so both sources write a summary of the differences between Malala's home in Birmingham and Oliphant's home in Lasswade. Obviously there's going to be differences. Margaret Oliphant lived in a cottage in 19th century Scotland. Malala talks about her home in Pakistan first and then goes on to talk about her house in Birmingham. So remember to focus on just the parts where she talks about the new house in Birmingham. It wants a summary of the differences. Say what is different and write a summary of each text describing the home. That should be about a paragraph for each, and then a paragraph talking about the differences. A summary, remember, is where you pick up all the key points and you put them into one paragraph. Okay. Question 3, you're now only going to look at source B, which is the 19th century text. How does Oliphant use language to show how much she loved her brother? Keyword there is language, only specifically about her brother though. So what language does she use to talk about her brother? It's mainly in the second half of the text, and one particular piece of interesting language that she uses is, and he was a kind of god to me. What language device is that? First of all, it's a simile, comparing him to a god. Then talk about the connotations of that language. What do you think of when you think of a god? Benevolent, omnipotent, omniscient, all-knowing, all-kind, all-powerful. So think about the connotations of that language, talk about the language devices she uses, and what effect that has on the reader. Does she love him? Yes, that's clear to see. How do we know that? How does the language do that? Question 4. We've done some practice on this with the discoveries question when you looked at Howard Carter's findings in Tutankhamun's tomb and also Charles Darwin's finding of the Fijians on the island. Compare the perspectives. The two key words are compare and convey. So you have to compare, say why they're different or why they're the same. They might be different, they might be the same. You decide. How do they convey this? So what language do they use? What methods do they use to convey their memories? They're writing in first person. We can trust this as truth because it's from their perspective. It is their truth. What methods do they use to convey it? So Oliphant is talking about her brother in like a fond, not her brother, her childhood home related to her brother and the memory she has specifically of her home with her brother there. Malala talks about her childhood home in Pakistan. So have a look at the first part of the text and go back to where she talks about her original home in Pakistan before she was moved to England because she got shot by the Taliban and had to seek asylum out of her home country. So how does she convey her memories of that? Are they the same? Are they different? Malala seems to be, she's sad about her childhood home. She misses it. Oliphant's, she misses it more because of the presence of her brother rather than the home itself. The last point there is to support your ideas with references to both texts. Please use quotes, please use quotation marks, and don't just jam them in anywhere. Say why that is important, why that piece of text that you've chosen is important. How is it important to the writers? Why have they chosen to say that? And the last question, section B, writing. The question is, your identity has nothing to do with the town or country or continent you come from. Being British, European, Asian or African makes no difference to who you are. Write an online article aimed at teenagers giving your thoughts in response to this statement. GASP analysis it. Genre, audience, style, purpose. Genre, article. Audience, teenagers. Style, it's teenagers, so semi-informal. And purpose, you're giving your thoughts, that's an argument. So you're going to argue your point of view in relation to that statement. Do you agree with it or do you disagree with it? You can be balanced and give both sides of the argument, or you can be biased and just give one side. It's completely up to you. Me personally, I would disagree with it. I think your identity is strongly related to the town, country or continent you come from. But also there are people who identify as Asian who were born in Britain, but they still have their identity as Asian because of the culture that they have in their home. So there's lots of nuances there to talk about. Obviously you can write about your own experiences. If you were born in a different country, has that shaped your identity at all? You decide. That is your point of view, that is your argument. Now there are 24 marks for organisation and content. That's using your DeForest devices. Direct address, alliteration, facts, opinions, emotive language, rhetorical questions, repetition, statistics, triplets. If you don't use those, you don't get the marks. That's the top and bottom of it. If you don't use a range of them, if you just use one, it's no good. You need to use a few. And 16 marks for technical accuracy. That is your spelling, punctuation and grammar, and it's using a range of sentence structures. Use complex sentences, use a short sentence for effect. Make use of spell check. Make use of typing on a computer if you have access to that, and get everything shipshape. If you have any trouble, then you know where I am. And I hope you're all okay. And I will speak to you soon. Now, how do I stop this?